Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Eating Healthy on a Budget event. We're so happy to have you all here today. It's so good to see you all always. I'm Amelia, if you don't know me, but I've had the pleasure of meeting many of you at our previous events, and I also help manage our Facebook community if you're in there. So you'll see me popping in there asking questions. But before we get started, I have just a few really quick announcements. So I want to give a special welcome to all of our members. Thank you so much for coming. It's so good to see you. And then I know there's a couple new people here who aren't members just yet. So for those of you who are friends and family of our members, we want to welcome you as well. Thanks so much for coming. If you aren't familiar, Mighty Health is the first fitness, wellness, and nutrition app designed for adults over 50. So we can help you reach your goals, whether it's losing weight or becoming mobile. You can learn more at mightyhealth.com, where we are currently running a 50% off promotion. You definitely want to take advantage of that. We don't do that all the time. And you can gift one to yourself or to a loved one if you feel like they might benefit. So we'll leave the link for you guys in the chat in just a few minutes. I'll pop it in there for you so you can take advantage of the 50% off. So if anyone's new to Zoom, I can just quickly explain the basics. So there's a mute button at the bottom, on the bottom left for most screens. So if everyone could just stay muted while Lindsay is going through all of your questions, that'd be great. And at the end, we'll ask you to come off mute if you'd like to ask a follow-up question. While Lindsay's talking, you can drop any questions you want in the chat box and we'll get to those. You can keep your video on or off. Whatever you're comfortable with is totally fine with us. And then you can switch your view to either focus on the speaker. So there's a speaker view, you can just watch Lindsay, or there's a gallery view where you can watch everyone. So now, without further ado, I would love to welcome our host, Coach Lindsay. Many of you know her as your Mighty Health Coach. She's wonderful. But for those of you who don't, Lindsay is based in Rapid City, South Dakota. She has a background in exercise science and is an ACE certified health coach. So welcome, Lindsay. We're going to get started. And also, Coach Margot is here. Many of you have Coach Margot. So there she is. She's just waving hello. She'll be answering your questions as well. But now I'm going to pass it off to Lindsay, and we're going to get everything kicked off.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Amelia, and welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see all of your faces for the second time since we did the Q&A a couple months ago. So welcome. I am just going to share my screen here. We're going to start off pretty similarly to how we did the last Q&A. So I have a little bit of just like a presentation to show just to get started, and then we'll kind of jump into some more, more specific questions after this. So the first question that we get with, hold on, sorry, can't skip to the next one here.
If you just click.
Oh, there it goes. Okay.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. We can't do anything without some technical difficulties. Okay, so bear with me. So the first thing that I want to talk about is why meal prepping is so important. So a lot of times we get a lot of barriers as far as like meal prepping is really expensive and, it's really time consuming, and it's really not. It's just kind of knowing the process of how to do it correctly. So meal prepping can actually save you tons of time, saves you money. It's going to create a better relationship with food because ideally you are, you're putting your heart and soul into cooking it. So you're excited to eat it. You are not feeling guilty after eating it like you would if you were to go through fast food or, make something that's not as healthy. Throughout the week, it's going to lower your stress level, mostly because you're not having to figure out what to eat on the fly. You have your meals in your fridge ready to go, and you're not having to worry about reaching your goals. It's going to help you reach your goals, and it's going to help reduce your portions. So lots of major benefits to meal prep. So just some general tips here to get started with meal prepping, because a lot of times it can be very overwhelming and you just don't know where to begin. So the biggest thing is start small. I know with a lot of concerns with meal prepping is that you have to spend an entire Sunday meal prepping for the entire week. And that's not necessarily true. Maybe that's the end goal, but it doesn't have to be the way you start. So, there's lots of different things you can do as far as maybe pick like 45 minutes out of the week to prep for just a few days, just to see how you like that and get in your rhythm. You can also kind of do a little bit of batch prep versus ingredient prep. So your batch prep is going to be like you're prepping the entire meal and it's going to be good to go to grab. Your ingredient prep though can be, picking out a meal and then prepping all of your ingredients. And then that way, when you're ready to cook it, it's super easy. You just throw it all together. So again, meal prepping doesn't have to be just this all or nothing thing. You can do whatever you need to do to set yourself up for success. And that can look a lot of different ways too. The next thing is invest in storage containers. So, Tupperware, I know for me, my Tupperware cabinet is just jumbled and you can't find lids for anything. And then you just get overwhelmed because you don't know where to put all your food that you cook. So, I personally really like the Hefty meal prep containers from Sam's Club. You can get like a big package of 30 for like $10. And they're dishwasher safe. So you buy them once and ideally you don't really have to buy them again. And this is going to help not only like save room in your fridge because they're really perfect for meal prepping. It's just going to save that headache of trying to figure out where to put your meals. So that's a big one. The next thing is keep a good variety of spices on hand. So with meal prep, the idea is in order to make it a consistent thing, you have to create variety, but at the same time, there's only so much variety you can create. And so if you can have a bunch of different spices on hand, you're going to be able to put a different spin on just your typical meals. And this is going to also help with like veggies too, because I know, plain broccoli, nobody likes plain broccoli, but if you throw a little bit of, Mrs. Dash garlic salt on it or, some olive oil, it's going to spice it up pretty good. So get creative with that. The next thing is huge. So make time for it. Make meal prepping a priority. A lot of times a big barrier is, I just don't have time in my week or my weekend. But in reality, if you have time to watch a Netflix show, you have time to meal prep. It's really just making it part of your schedule. So a lot of times I'll say with meal prepping and even with exercise, schedule it onto your calendar like you would like a doctor's appointment. You're not going to schedule a doctor's appointment and then just not show up for it. So do the same with meal prep. Schedule it into your day. Take a Sunday morning from 8 to 9 in the morning, get what you can done. And if you don't get it all done, then that's okay. That's your allotted time for meal prepping. And then that's what you work with for the rest of the week. So that's a big one. Just make it a priority. The next thing is keep track of all your recipes. We're going to be opening up our big recipe page later on. So save your recipes, make like a recipe book if you have to, save them in your phone, bookmark them. This is going to take a lot of the headache of trying to figure out what to make week after week. So have your good staples, work through those. And once you get sick of those, find some new staples, but really keep track of like what you like in your meal prep. And then the last thing is make it fun. So a lot of times, especially for those of you that don't like to cook, like not everybody loves to be in the kitchen and that's fine. But make it fun. So throw on some good music while you're meal prepping, put on a podcast and involve like your grandkids and your kids and your spouses and make it kind of like a fun thing and make it like a tradition that you do with your family maybe. That way you look forward to it and it's not just like this tedious chore that you have to do week to week. So those are just some general tips to get started. So next, of course, the biggest thing too is budgeting. So how do we make meal prep budget friendly? The first tip is shop your pantry first. So even if you have like some red items in your pantry, that's okay. You can still utilize those, maybe just not as often, use them in really, really small portions, but that way you're not having to waste it and you don't have to throw it away. You can just get rid of it, but still utilize it. So shop your pantry first when making your lists of what you're going to meal prep. And then kind of going along with that, utilize what's in your pantry first and then make your list and go to the grocery store and only get on what's on your list. There's a popular saying, don't shop when you're hungry. And this couldn't be more true. So eat before you go to the grocery store because you're going to be way more tempted to grab, the ice cream and the pizza because it looks so good and you're so hungry. So eat beforehand, grab what's only on your list, go into the grocery store with blinders on, and you're going to save a ton of money doing that. The other thing is shop in bulk. So if you're able to get a Sam's Club or a Costco membership and get, the big ginormous bags of veggies or the big, bags of chicken, that's going to allow your prep to go a lot further if you're able to shop in bulk. If not, you can still shop in bulk. I know Walmart has a section where you can buy like the bulk products. So do what you can to kind of utilize your money and make it go further. The next thing is freeze your prepped meals. So a lot of times with meal prepping too, a barrier can be like, what if I over prep and then everything goes bad? Most meals that you prep can just be put in the freezer, especially with those hefty meal prep containers that I mentioned earlier. They're freezer safe. So throw stuff in the freezer. Don't be afraid to utilize them and warm them up later. And then pre-portioned meals, of course, that really just goes along with meal prepping in general. If you meal prep, you're going to be able to have, pre-portion your meals, which is going to make your meals go further. It's going to help you stay on your goals as well. And then the last thing is shop generic. So you don't have to buy brand name foods. You don't have to buy, the flashy organic and all this stuff. We're going to talk a little bit more about like organic versus conventional foods here later, but shop generic. There's nothing wrong with getting like the Great Value rice and, the generic Target brand of food. Nothing wrong with it. It's going to save you tons of money. So those are some tips for budgeting. The next thing I want to kind of get into, just a few comparisons here of how much meal prepping can actually save you money. So here's a comparison. Here on the left, you'll see the meal prepped egg and veggie cups. This recipe will be available later, but this recipe for the ingredients costs about $5. All it is 8 eggs and then some veggies of your choice. So all you do is crack an egg, put some veggies in a muffin tin, put it in the oven, and you got little egg bites. So super, super easy prep to do. It's going to make 12 cups. So that's about a week's worth of breakfast if you have 2 egg cups in the morning. And it breaks down to 41 cents per serving. So compare that to Starbucks egg bites, which is $4.45 for 2. You're basically quadrupling your cost if you just go through the drive-thru and get it from Starbucks. So just a big comparison and a kind of a debunk of meal prepping can be expensive. It doesn't have to be. It's just knowing the right recipes to make. So again, this recipe will be available later. And then kind of on the flip side, a more like lunch and dinner comparison. So meal prepped ground turkey stir fry, super, super easy and popular recipe. Makes 5 servings, and all the ingredients for all 5 servings is only about $7. So again, super, super cheap. It's going to be $1.48 per serving. And you compare that to going through the drive-thru at McDonald's where you're getting like a Big Mac meal for $7.60. You're basically spending the same amount of money on 1 Big Mac meal that you would on 5 meal prepped meals. So again, big comparison, just being able to find the right food to make is going to save you tons of money. So that recipe will be available later. So yeah, that kind of concludes just some more of the general questions, general slides that I had to share. And then we can kind of get started on some of the more specific questions.
Yeah, thank you. Those comparisons at the end, it just blows my mind. I have fallen victim to those Starbucks egg white bites. So now I'm going to make those at home. Thank you.
You can make your own.
Yeah, I'm going to do that tomorrow. That's amazing. Cool. So now we're going to jump into, you all submitted some questions beforehand. So we've gone through and we're going to answer a bunch of those. So the first topic we're going to dive into is just general food storage, prep, and meals for the entire family. So the first one I have here for you, Lindsay, is how do you properly store prepped vegetables and foods so that they don't spoil? I know a lot of people worry about putting their produce and stuff in the refrigerator and it's going to spoil too quickly. So do you have any good tips around that?
Yeah, so this is another big barrier. You don't want to go out and buy all these veggies and then just have them spoil. And so a couple tips to do is when you buy like your greens, like your lettuce and your spinach and your kale, stuff like that, don't wash them right when you get them. If you wash them and then you put them in the fridge, you're going to have that extra moisture that's going to cause them to wilt a lot faster. So if you can just keep them in an airtight container, especially with lettuce, I like to throw like a paper towel in there just to kind of help soak up some of that moisture off the leaves, and wash it right when you're ready to eat it. That way you're not causing extra moisture and you can kind of just make it last a little bit longer. Things like herbs, carrots, asparagus, green onions, those you can put in about an inch of water in a cup, put it in your fridge, and that's going to help them from drying out. So that's a really big tip that I've actually seen become very popular via TikTok, of course, of all things, you know. So being able to do that will help those kinds of things last a little bit longer. Things like cucumbers, potatoes, tomatoes, squashes, some of your starchier veggies are actually best left at room temperature. So it's easy to just kind of get your veggies and throw them in the fridge and then just expect them to last long. And actually, if you leave those out, they're going to last a lot longer. The cold, especially with cucumbers, makes them spoil a lot faster. And then things like with your cut veggies, you know, it's really important to be able to, like, if you cut your cucumbers, your carrots, you know, that's super easy to grab and go. So kind of the same thing goes with like the leafy greens. Don't wash them ahead of time, just cut them up. You can buy containers that have like a little bit of a strainer in the bottom that'll help kind of get rid of some of the extra moisture. So again, invest in good containers to preserve your veggies if you can. And then another tip is store your fruits away from your veggies. So fruits actually give off like a gas in the fridge that can make veggies spoil really, really quickly. So there's a reason that you have 2 different drawers in your fridge. So make sure you're storing those separately. And then really the last tip I have for you guys is don't be afraid to buy frozen veggies. There's nothing wrong with buying frozen broccoli, cauliflower, frozen spinach, like especially if you're one who lives alone and you really are worried about your veggies spoiling, just buy frozen. There's nothing wrong with it.
Wow, that's great. Those are good tips. I didn't know about the gas that fruit gave off. So that
I can't remember what it's called, but it's a gas that
gives
off.
That makes total sense. Amazing.
Yeah.
So this is another thing about vegetables. This next question, I know it's a big topic a lot of people debate, but can preparing some vegetables ahead of time reduce the nutritional value? And if so, are there any tricks to prevent that if that is true?
So in short answer, it's not necessary. I mean, it's not necessarily true. It's not going to make a big difference. Thanks, Margot. Ethylene is the gas that fruit gives off. Sorry, I got distracted. So yeah, with that, I mean, if cutting your veggies ahead of time is going to allow you to eat them and be successful, do it. Basically, your veggies will lose nutrients over time the longer they sit. So it's not necessarily because they're being cut up. It's just, you know, the longer your veggies sit, the more they lose their nutrients. So cut them up. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not really going to make a big impact on the nutrient intake.
Okay. So basically it's whatever's going to help you eat them is the best method to do. That's what I got from that. Okay, great.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, the next question is, how do I make sure my prepped meals are well balanced?
This is a great question because that's another thing with, you know, meal prep. It's like, how do I make sure that I'm getting all the nutrients I need? How do I make sure that I'm not just getting one food group over the other? So when it comes to balanced meals, really not all meals have to be balanced. You want to kind of look at what your overall day looks like and make sure that you're getting a good combination of food groups throughout the day. But really in general with your meals, make sure that you're getting at least like the 3 core food groups. So those are your complex carbs, like your potatoes, your rice, your quinoa, couscous, stuff like that, your protein, and then your veggies. So the biggest rule of thumb when it comes to figuring out how to portion those in your meal is you want to do a quarter of your plate or your intake with your carbs. Because you need carbs for energy, but you don't need a lot of them. That's where you can get a lot of the extra calories from. So make sure you're choosing for starters, you make sure you're choosing your complex carbs, so your good carbs, and then only do a quarter of your plate. The other quarter can be from your protein, and then half from your veggies. So always make sure that veggies exceed the rest on your plate. Another kind of tip for this too, that's a little bit of a segue from this question, is eat your veggies first. This can kind of solve a couple different problems. It can solve the fact that veggies really sometimes aren't enjoyable for people, and that's okay. So eat them first, get them over with. And then the second thing is it can help kind of fill you up so that by the time you do get to maybe some of your carbier parts of your meal, maybe you're not as hungry for it, and it'll just kind of reduce your portions for that way. So
that's great. I gotta get those veggies in first.
Yeah, get them in, get them over with.
So I know also many people here have families and live in homes with many people. So when you're trying to stick to this meal prepping routine, how do you incorporate meal prep for families or if just whoever lives in your home?
Yeah, this is a great question. It can be very situational. So I don't know that there's really a one fits all answer to this, but the biggest thing is sitting your family down and discussing, what sounds good for the week to eat. What do you guys want to eat? Every family and family friendly meals are going to look different. And so it kind of goes hand in hand with making it enjoyable. Include the family. If you feel like you're someone who your family maybe is like not supportive of your goals, or they don't want a meal prep, that might be a conversation to have too. It can be an uncomfortable conversation, but sit them down and say, hey, this is super important to me. I would really like your guys' input and help on how to make some meals, how to meal prep, and figure out what they want. Especially with some of like those of you guys that have like teenagers at home that are super picky too. Figure out what their staples are. Maybe it's pizza, maybe it's tacos, but put a healthy spin on it. So you guys can make cauliflower crust pizzas. You guys can make taco salads. So, you can still do those staple, feel good meals, but just put a spin on them. So I guess to summarize my answer, sit down with your family and talk about that with them and kind of figure out what they like.
That's great. And then on the other hand, sometimes it's just yourself at home or maybe just your spouse. So then meal prepping can be pretty big portions. So then how do you do meal prepping for just one or two people?
Yeah. So this is kind of, I guess, similar but opposite answer. So still sit down with your spouse or whoever you're living with, whoever it may be, or it's just yourself, and really just make that plan for meals, because the good thing about too having less people to cook for is your meals are going to go a lot longer. So figure out, how many days of leftovers you guys can have, how you can filter in those leftovers. And then the biggest thing too is if you're looking at recipes, most recipes are set for like a family of 4. So just cut the recipe in half, cut every ingredient in half, and then you'll just end up with a smaller portion, and you'll be fine.
Perfect. Yeah. Leftovers are key.
Yeah. Be okay with leftovers.
Yeah, gotta be okay with that. So the next section that I want to dive into here is more about like time and budgeting. So the first question that we have is, what are the healthiest inexpensive foods to buy?
Yes. So this is kind of a double-edged question, because healthy foods don't necessarily have to be expensive. So yes, there are healthy foods that are a little bit pricier. I mean, of course, getting some rice and broccoli is going to be more expensive than getting ramen, but you can do it in a cost-effective way. And so really when you're shopping, just kind of goes back to just sticking to your list. Look at your cart and look at your ratio of your green, your yellow, and your red foods. And always just make sure your green foods outweigh the rest. It's okay to buy the yellow and the red foods. Like I said, moderation is key, balance is key. So if you have to, if you come across a week where paycheck's a little tight and you have to get more yellow or red foods, that's okay. There are good yellow and red food. I mean, maybe not red foods, but there's good yellow foods like your rice and your, complex carbs, and, just shop smart, I would say, when it comes to buying healthy, inexpensive food. The other thing that we're going to kind of talk a little bit about here is organic versus conventional food. So this is where the cost can be driven up as well, because a lot of times when you think healthy food, you think organic. I have to buy all natural, and that's not really the case. Of course, that's going to be situational. It's going to be kind of a personal decision. But I want to kind of talk a little bit about the difference between the two. So in general, organic foods are going to cost about 20% more than conventional. So you see the big price difference there with those foods. With organic foods, they're not necessarily pesticide free either. So there's a lot of, well, not a lot, but there is a list of USDA pesticides that are approved for organic foods. So if your goal with organic foods is to be 100% pesticide free, you're probably not going to get there. Of course, these pesticides that are used in organic foods are safer, but they're still going to be in there. So when it comes to organic foods as well, you have 4 different categories. So you have 100% organic, you have organic, you have made with organic ingredients, and then you have made with specific organic ingredients. So there can be a lot of different labels on these foods. With 100% organic, it's pretty much what it is in the name. It's 100% certified organic ingredients. There must be a certifying agent. There must be an organic seal. So anytime that you're worried, there has to be like a USDA organic seal on it if it's legit 100% organic. Organic by itself means that it's about 95% certified organic food. So there can still be about a 5% part of that food that is non-organic. Still must have the certifying agent, still must have the seal. Then you get into the foods that are made with organic ingredients. So those can still be super pricey because it says made with organic ingredients. These ones have to be at least 70% certified organic. So there can still be a 30% part of that food that's not organic. These foods do not require the seal of approval from the USDA. And then same with made with specific ingredients. These are foods with less than 70% organic. So again, when you're getting into the store, like I would say it's worth it to buy 100% organic, but if you're getting into like made with organic ingredients, just buy the original thing. You're going to save a few bucks and you're not really, it's no different. So just to kind of get into that a little bit, of course, there's a lot more that goes into it. So if you ever have specific questions, just message me, James, or Margot about it. And then the last thing is all natural. So this is kind of another food claim that can drive the price up a little bit. And really the thing with all natural is the FDA hasn't put a formal definition on all natural. So the idea is that all natural means that it hasn't been artificially grown, but it has nothing to do with the production of the food. So you can have a food that has been all naturally grown, but then it gets into production and you don't know what's going into it. So all natural, I say, is the biggest thing to not spend your money on because it really does not mean anything. So long explanation for all of that, but just to kind of debunk a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that was a lot of good info, but maybe we could send everyone a little recap of those different definitions, 100% organic versus organic, et cetera. That would probably help. Amazing. Okay, so how about those of us, which I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but those of you who are vegan or vegetarian, how do you eat vegan or vegetarian on a budget? I know a lot of those alternative foods can be expensive. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, so this can really just kind of tie into the rest of the discussion is really shop around. Protein alternatives can be expensive, but they don't have to be. So things like chickpeas, black beans, and really just any plant-based products, they're really growing. You see new plant-based meats and different stuff out there all the time. And so just shop around, shop generic with those types of things. It's okay. But they really don't have to be much more expensive than traditional meat. The other thing is, and I got a tip from one of our other Mighty employees that is vegan, and he mentioned that finding a good marinade with like your tofu, stuff like that is good. So of course, make sure it's sugar-free and whatnot, but if you can kind of add a different spin on, because you are so limited on your protein alternatives, continue to add different spins on it with the marinades, with the spices. And that way, not only do you have variety, but you're able to stick with like your cheaper protein alternatives.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The different marinades can make a huge difference, even if it's real protein too. I think that really changes up what you're eating for sure. Okay, so our last section that we are going to dive into before we open it up for questions is kind of just different recipes and more miscellaneous questions here. So the first one is all about baking. So is baking with almond flour, coconut flour okay? And what about baking with monk fruit so that it doesn't increase someone's blood sugar?
Yeah, so this is a good question. As far as, it's going to be a simple answer. As far as almond flour and coconut flour, they're great options. They're great low carb options for traditional flour. They also make really good breading. If you are meal prepping chicken, I get a lot like, I don't want to meal prep chicken every day of the week, but do breaded chicken with like some almond flour on it. So put a spin on that chicken if you are doing it all week. So it's great. As far as those sweeteners like monk fruit and swerve and stevia and stuff, I would say stevia and monk fruit are going to be your best options for sweeteners. However, ideally, you shouldn't have to sweeten your food. Remember that you are getting sugar from your carbs, you're getting sugar from other foods. So ideally, you wouldn't need to sweeten your foods. As you decrease your sweeten and your sugar intake, your palate's going to adjust to not really crave that anymore. So you shouldn't have to. But if you do, just as you kind of start getting in that, monk fruit and stevia are your best options.
Perfect. How about on the saltier side though? So what can people eat instead of potato chips that's crunchy and salty?
Yes. So this is a question we get all the time. What can I snack on? What are some good things to prep for snacks? So remember, I will disclosure, think of why you need to snack. Are you eating enough during your meals? Are you really hungry? Stuff like that. But in terms of like crunchy, salty snacks, zucchini chips and kale chips, super easy, super effective. You can still get the crunch and the salt. Again, we'll post recipes later for that. Pickles are a huge thing to eat when you're craving something salty and crunchy. So I would just say those are my suggestions. Those things you can, like with the zucchini chips and the kale chips, you can bake in bulk and kind of have little baggies throughout the week.
Sounds good. Is that similar with things like sweet potato chips, or is that considered more of like a potato chip?
Yeah, you definitely can make like your own potato chips too. That's actually a good point. And it's when it comes to like potato chips out of a bag, yeah, you don't want to do that because they're fried in oil. But if you slice up a potato, or a sweet potato would be even better. Throw some salt on it, put it in the oven. That's another great option as well.
Perfect. That sounds good. How about though for breakfast? So we had a lot of people asking about what are some good breakfasts that you can make the night before?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I would say is overnight oats is super huge, super simple. Again, we'll post a recipe later, but really if you just throw about, I believe the recipe I have in mind is about half a cup of oats, quarter cup of almond milk or regular milk or water even, and then put it in the fridge. The oats are gonna be soft for the morning. So you grab it, put some fruit on it, and you're good to go. So that's a really good one to do ahead of time. That's really, really easy. The homemade breakfast cups that I mentioned before, those are super easy because you can freeze them and you can refrigerate them, pop them in the microwave for like 15 seconds, you're good to go. And then you can also make like homemade breakfast, like burritos or breakfast wraps. And you can refrigerate those ahead of time and freeze those. So those are some things that not necessarily night before, but things that you can prep for breakfast.
Amazing. So how about in terms of timing, what do you recommend if you're in a rush, and like what are meals that you can prep in 30 minutes or less?
Yeah, so just some really simple things like the stir fry recipe I posted before. You can do things like that. Crock pot meals, while they're obviously take longer than 30 minutes to cook, the prep work is less than 30 minutes. One good thing, a good way to cook chicken, do like shredded chicken, is throw some chicken in the crock pot with some low sodium chicken broth, let it cook for a couple hours and it's done. So really just utilizing like your crock pot, your Instapot, things like zucchini boats, stuffed peppers. Those are all really, really easy things that don't take any time. So all of these recipes will be available to you guys of things that I'm mentioning, but it's just really getting creative with what you have, and it doesn't have to take hours to cook.
Perfect. Yeah. And we will be launching that big recipe epicenter, as we're calling it, soon. So you'll all have access to that.
Yeah.
And then the last question under these kind of recipe themed ones is some ideas for Instapot meals.
Yeah, so this is, we got this question a couple times because Instapots, they're just growing. Everybody has them. It's like air fryers. So basically what we decided to do with this question and a lot of more of the recipe driven questions is we developed, like Amelia mentioned, a big recipe document. So we are going to have this available to you guys within the next couple days, probably by the end of the week. So we'll make sure we get it sent out to you guys, but it's going to have recipes for breakfast, lunch, dinner, 30-minute recipes, Instapot recipes, snacks. So there's a ton of recipes for you guys to utilize as you embark on your meal prep journey. So keep an eye out for that. And that'll be, like I said, available by the end of the week, hopefully.
I'm very excited for that. Amazing. Well, that was all of our pre-prepared questions. I know some of you might have some follow-up questions based on what we went over. So if you'd like, you can come off mute and just directly ask, or you can pop it into the chat and we'll have Lindsay and Margot answer for you.
Yes. They can be general questions too, you guys. They don't have to be specifically for meal prep since we are in a good spot with time.
You know, Lindsay, I've addressed this question with you before because I worry so much about the complex carbs like rice and pasta and stuff. And I really don't know how many servings of that kind of thing do I need to think about during the day? Like if I did have some rice once since we talked, but what is the best, rule of thumb? I mean, when I grew up, we used to have a meat and a rice and a vegetable and a bread. And, we had like this huge thing. And then my family here, my daughter-in-law tends to, like serve a piece of meat on some spinach leaves. So what's the balance of like that? I know you addressed it a little bit, but
sure,
like putting that kind of carb into the meal.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Twice a day.
It's going to be dependent kind of on your goals. Are you wanting to maintain? Are you wanting to, still lose weight? Your carbohydrate intake, we know, contributes to your weight loss, weight gain, etc. So it's going to be a little bit situational. However, a good rule of thumb that I say is have one serving per meal. You should be fine. Don't have your meal with potatoes and bread and noodles, for instance, with rice, like rice is always a great thing to pair with lunches because it lasts well and it's a complex carb, so it's going to provide you energy. So I would just say always two with portions. Like, generally here at Mighty Health, and I know a lot of you guys know this, we don't really push weighing foods, portion control, being super strict about that because it's not always maintainable. So, don't necessarily worry too much about like the exact portion, but I would say just stick to the serving size on the back of the package. So for rice, a quarter of a cup. Typically potatoes, stick to like, 2 or 3 ounces, or again, a quarter of your plate. So don't worry too much about the exact portion, but just make sure you're not exceeding more than 1 starch per meal. And you should be good to stick to like 2 or 3 servings of starch a day.
And you don't advocate for all this, like my daughter-in-law, the one who serves on the spinach leaves, she advocates like 5 meals a day, but Mighty Health, really, you're saying that's really not a good objective? Better to just eat more at a meal?
Exactly. Yep. Because you want to really look, there's nothing wrong with snacks if you're truly hungry and if they are good snacks, snack on veggies, hummus, stuff like that. So, but yes, ideally you want to just be able to have 3 structured meals a day, maybe a snack in there if you need it. Make sure you're getting enough in your meal to last you till your next meal. You know, there is a little bit of research to say that, you know, eating more frequently will increase your metabolism. But I think in general terms speaking, just focus on your 3 meals a day, because the more often you eat, it can kind of create a harder balance between your true and false hunger. And so really just making sure you're listening to your hunger cues when it comes to meals and snacks, and just deciding if you're truly hungry or if it's just out of habit, boredom, and make sure you're getting enough in your meals.
That's great news. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Does anyone else have any other questions they want to bring up? Drop it in the chat or just come off mute, whatever.
Scrolling through the chat here to see, it looks like we've got a lot of good conversation in the chat, which is awesome.
A lot going. Margot's been getting back to everybody really nicely as well.
A lot of good conversation there, and we talk about different types of noodles in here. I don't know if that's anything we would like to address. Talk about different types of yogurt, what to put in our coffee.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so any of those, if that we want to spark a conversation around that.
Yeah, so it's funny you bring up the coffee thing. And I don't know, maybe this is just news to me because I'm younger, but my mother-in-law said that she'll put like a little scoop of peanut butter in her coffee with like a little dash of whole milk. I haven't tried it, but she says it's awesome, and it'll kind of help sweeten up or give your coffee some flavor without having that artificial coffee creamer. Yeah, Cheryl's, see, thumbs up. I get thumbs up from a lot of people with that. So try it out. I mean, don't knock until you try it. But yeah, little scoop of peanut butter, even some powdered peanut butter if you don't want the extra fat in the peanut butter. But peanut butter with a little dash of milk would be a good coffee alternative. Talking about noodles, I did see shirataki noodles in there, which are awesome. Zoodles, of course, spaghetti, squash. I mean, you can really broaden your horizons with noodles these days. They make tons of different alternatives.
I know I'm seeing new ones every time I go to the store.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Quinoa ones, pea ones, different, with so many different kinds.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it looks like we do have a question from Cindy in the chat. Will the recipes be able to print off the website?
I think so. Let me double check. If not, we will definitely make that a function. But we should be able to make that happen. Yes, sure.
Well, one thing I found out, and I do this during your presentation too, is you can take a picture of the recipe,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can print it on your air from your phone.
Yes, that's another good option. Yep, definitely. Thanks for sharing that, Cheryl. Another thing too that we're trying to do, because we know that like if you click on a recipe link, you have to scroll through a bunch of different stuff in order to get to the actual recipe. So we'll really try to make it so that you guys don't have to scroll through a bunch of different stuff, and we'll have the recipe there for you.
I just wanted to thank you, but also to say, I think you're so right about the sauces. I get kind of stuck in a rut, because I'll know like this has so many carbs, and I'll eat the same thing over and over again. And my kids, I have 20-year-olds, and they get kind of really tired. And so my youngest ordered HelloFresh meals, which was so expensive. But, it was kind of fun. We were all cooking together, and I said, we could just buy everything that we need, and we can kind of make our own sauces too, because there's recipes for, healthier sauces. So I think I have everybody on board now without
awesome. Glad to hear it.
HelloFresh money, because they were really expensive, but yeah.
And they are, and those meals I think are sometimes good to maybe even try out for like a week or two, just to get some ideas, and then you cancel your subscription and keep the recipe cards, and then kind of put your own spin on it. But you're right. I mean, sauces can really be a game changer when it comes to flavor and variety. So thanks for sharing that, Jill.
Amazing. And I also just dropped in, we have a really comprehensive blog post all about meal prepping. So I threw it in the chat for you guys in case you want to read it on your own time and get some more tips that we didn't cover today. But unless anyone else has another question, I think we're going to wrap it up. We really, really enjoyed seeing all of you. It's amazing to see your faces.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks you guys for coming so
Thank
much.
you.
If you have other questions that if your question did not get answered, please message your coach. And then also, if for those of you newer members, there was just a general nutrition Q&A back in May that we did, and you can add it as a track. So if there's any general nutrition questions that you guys have, visit that to see if it can get your question answered as well. Thank you guys.